All right, hello everyone. Welcome to this talk titled Domain Admin Through Breaking and Entering. My name is Erik Alm. I am a senior security consultant at WithSecure. I mainly work with red teaming. So when I say that, that means essentially simulating targeted attacks towards our clients using covert operations the same way a real threat actor would. Now, fortunately for me, this sometimes entails physical security as well. So in case you were wondering who the tired-looking guy with the coffee is, it's not just my morning routine. This is actually a selfie that I took after being lovingly handed a coffee by the receptionist of the main office of one of our clients, where I was visiting a person that no longer actually works there.
My name is Erik. I too work as a security consultant at WithSecure. I mainly do application security and penetration testing, but have found my true calling in bullshitting my way into places where I don't belong. So I've been doing a lot of that these last couple of years as well. My picture here is me and a colleague of ours brute forcing our way through a RFID badge reader at a client engagement. So we're going to talk a bit about physical security testing today. We're going to have a little show and tell from some of our recent engagements. The demo gods willing, we have a small practical demonstration where we're going to attempt to do a card cloning as well. It's going to be fun. So yeah, that's it. As cybersecurity professionals, why would we care about physical security, right? Well, besides the obvious, sort of compliance question where cyber and physical security controls kind of intertwine because you have them, in your ISOs and SOC 2s and what have you. There is a strict interdependency between them, where if you have a threat model where you have a physically capable adversary, having or lacking physical security controls will severely undermine your cybersecurity controls, right? You can have the most advanced EDR or XDR or whatever DR system in the world, but if you allow anyone from the street to just go in and plug in an unmanaged device on your network, all of that visibility goes out the window anyway.
And so just to clarify that this isn't just an excuse for two guys named Erik to, role play James Bond and get to do really cool super secret agent bullshit. These are some obviously cherry-picked examples of real threat actors leveraging, bypassing or breaking off physical security controls with the aim of achieving cyber-based objectives. All right, so when we actually talk to our clients about physical security, one of the things that we like to start with talking about is what we call their physical risk profile, right? And so what we mean when we say physical risk profile is basically answering the question, what should we be worried about, right? So that is going to be the enabler for that organization to spend their resources, effectively in places where it makes sense, right? So obviously there are different threat actors for different organizations, right? So if we look here at this beautiful graphic that I've made, the sort of base of the threat actor landscape when it comes to physical security is the opportunistic attackers, which is, people that just see something that's valuable and think, I like stuff that's valuable. So that could be, for example, walking past an IT room and just saying, oh, cool, laptops. Boom, window, dead, run away with laptops. Then we move up to this middle segment where we typically see organized crime. And that could be, for example, what I showed you on the previous slide, these threat actors that do the, almost at this point, stereotypical, hey, I'm here to deliver a package. And they get let in, but the real package they deliver is just like a Raspberry Pi they use to get initial access to the network, which is, sort of between the lines what me and Erik do. Then at the very top, and hopefully not every organization has to worry about this. This is, highly dependent on both your vertical and the size of your company, right? How big of a target you would be. But most likely, not everyone needs to worry about these advanced persistent threats. But that could be things such as, a state-backed industrial espionage campaign where they find an employee of a company and say, "You want extra money? We'll give you extra money if you give us all of the secret shit from where you work." Or someone just saying, "Hey, I'm an IT admin. I see that you're looking for an IT admin. I take employment there and then do nasty shit as an IT admin." Right? So regardless of which of these threat actors you're sort of taking into account and like based on having evaluated your risk profile, it's pretty much always about reducing the window of opportunity. So for the example where it's just someone that lobs a rock through a window and runs out with all of your laptops, that reduction would be maybe in the form of putting bars behind your windows or not having windows at all in your IT room. And for the more like advanced attackers, that could be something like implementing a 4-eyes process so that nobody is allowed to be alone in the most sensitive areas, right? That significantly reduces the risk because you all of a sudden require 2 insiders.
So yeah, we're going to break things up with the practical demonstration to sort of get that out of the way quickly. We're going to go over a couple of different vulnerabilities that we usually find on these jobs, but for the practical demo, we're going to at least attempt to do a badge cloning, which is something that we usually do on most of our jobs because it's like 1,000% success rate.
And we like badges.
We're going to see if we can get this over the mic. We're going to see if we can Alt-tab to the ESP key interface.
Yeah, it worked. Nice. Step 1 complete.
Amazing. So what we usually do, for those who don't know, is that plenty of these access badges are using low-frequency RFID, which is essentially a chip on the card which is powered by the actual badge reader, and it has a small, a couple of bytes identifier, often issued sequentially, so you can easily brute force them if you have like a lost guest pass or things like that. Nonetheless, what we have here as well is in our messenger bag a long-range RFID reader connected to a small chip that you can get online or sort of build yourself from cheap components. I believe this is the real deal, called an ESP key. And what this little thing does is that it takes all of the information from your badge reader. It talks this protocol called WeGand that most of these products are using, and it emits a small access point over Wi-Fi, so you can read everything that is actually being parsed by the reader. You can replay whichever badge identifiers, etc., or even pin codes that it sniffs off.
Yeah, so what we have here up on the screen right now is actually that laptop hooked up to a wireless access point that is inside of this bag. Would you mind trying to refresh the page to see if we successfully read it?
Is it going to work? I don't know. So usually what we do is we just make sure to stand close enough to someone, and this distance is it's kind of uncomfortable. I'm feeling kind of uncomfortable here. But if there are plenty of people in an elevator or in a crowded lunch cafeteria, it's kind of fine, right? You could even lift it up to pick your nose, or whatever. And like most of the time, it works every time.
Except when you try and demo it, right?
Oh, wait. There we go.
So actually, yes, it worked. Yay.
So can we... Oh, we can't click this. Yes, we can. Okay, so it sniffs off the identifier for the badge. We're able to replay it at will. So if we have this implanted somewhere, we can just repeat the reading or writing, etc.
Or you can write this UID to a badge that you just have laying around, and then you can badge in as if though you were the user that you actually just cloned. Let's see if we can get back to the presentation. Yes. All right, so just a little bit of a continuation here. As Erik just said, that what you can actually do with this little tool, apart from putting it into a regular long-range reader, is you can actually use these headers here. If you unscrew the reader, and a lot of these readers aren't securely mounted. I mean, this is a case where it was just regular screws, so you could just bring a screwdriver and unscrew it yourself. What you then do is you expose the wires, and you use this little tool and these terminals here. You basically split the wires and pass it through this little chip. And what you can then do, using this same interface that we just demoed, you can then replay attacks remotely since it's a wireless access point.
It picks up pin numbers as well if it's on a number pad, like we have pictured here. So sometimes these readers are connected with these security screws, like, and you need an actual key to open them up. Pictured here is your standard sort of Vanderbilt or Samsung or whichever brand they are these days, EM40 whatever. And if you look underneath them, you see this little box with a number in it, and I don't know how clean you can see it, but it says 26 on this one, and that is the key number. There are about 50 keys in circulation for these things, and you can get them for very cheap on eBay, and it's the same for everyone. So for any given organization, you usually need to find maybe 1 or 2 or 3 keys at most in order to start tampering with the readers. When you open them up, you're going to trigger a tamper switch that is going to send a small notification to a computer in the building that no one ever looks at. So just don't worry about that. Next up, networked printers. Usually these days, you can't just walk in somewhere and plug into any Ethernet port. People are using 802.1x or other such authentication measures to make sure that only specific ports that are in use are allowed to be on the network. Being hunched over a printer like this, or just jumping behind it and putting down your 4G enabled Raspberry or whatever with a small switch, it's super easy to just inject yourself into that authenticated data stream and just hit the network from that point. This picture I took on a client engagement earlier this year. It was a room where they housed the workstation that controlled the security system, and there were always employees in there. And when they weren't, things were locked down using this combination lock. And where the process failed was that every time they locked the padlock, they actually scrambled the combination, but they didn't scramble it any time when they unlocked it. So whenever people were there and they felt safe and they were always watching this workstation, you could just go in and take a quick peek at the combination and just show up later, and you would be able to get full access to the rest of the building. And the classic, of course, if you have the most secure lock, you can have biometrics and everything on this super secure door. If you don't make sure that your walls actually go all the way up to the ceiling, we're going to just jump over it. And this is why we bring a ladder on all of our engagements, because this is common. And my favorite, this picture got sent to us from a colleague on an earlier engagement where they were infiltrating this compound, super secure. You can see there's a fence, they have cameras all over the place and so on. And they found this lockbox out in the public parking space, which they managed to pry open. And inside they see a switch that gave them access to this security VLAN that controlled the cameras and so on. So after a very rudimentary port scan, they found the management console for their physical security controls, which of course had default credentials still on it. So before even walking in the door, they had full permissions on their own access badges. They could see all the cameras everywhere, and they could just walk in as they saw fit. And lastly, the most common thing, right? Nobody cares about what you're doing, as long as you just act like you belong. I mean, this is a trope, and everyone keeps saying this. And every time you're on a job, you're super nervous about it the first time. But really, nobody cares about who you are or what you're doing. So as long as you look busy while doing it, you can get away with whatever.
Yeah. So enough of us just talking about these theoretical things that we may or may not see. We obviously came here to brag about the cool shit that we've done. Small disclaimer, client's gonna client, so to protect us from ending up in a physical security nightmare, aka jail, we're gonna have to redact some details, but hopefully it's still gonna be entertaining.
Right, so to give you an outline of one of these engagements that we have been on, this was a global corporation with a couple of locations in Stockholm. And they approached us to test their resilience against corporate espionage, which is a ton of fun, because usually on these things, your objective is to get in somewhere, leave a business card, or plug in and ping a machine on the client's network. Here, our objectives was to plant fake surveillance equipment in the offices of their executive, like C-suite, upper management, as well as photograph their financial statements, upcoming product prototypes, and things like this. So methodology-wise, the way we structure these things are usually the same as any cyber job. We start off with a reconnaissance phase, where we just kind of sleuth the internet. We bring down blueprints from the city planner's office, at least in Sweden, which is fantastic. Protocols from renovations or whatever that is going on. And we start thinking about initial access, which is usually things like card cloning or just tailgating and social engineering and so on. So for this, the first objective was hitting the finance department, where we knew from the recon phase that they were renovating the floor below. So I showed up one day in workwear, going, "Hey, I work downstairs. I'm sorry, but we fucked up the sprinkler system, and there's no pressure at all. I'm going floor to floor to just make sure that we didn't cause a fire hazard for you guys. Do you mind if I just, real quick?" And she was like, yeah, of course, that sounds super important. Come on in. So that got me into the finance department, where they had this open floor plan, but everyone was out to lunch at the time. And I surely didn't look like I belonged, because I was just grinding binders blindly in order to take my pictures, sweating bullets, shaking. But luckily for me, no one actually showed up. So at this point, we had the surveillance equipment objective still ahead of us, right? So after a couple of weeks of walking around in the office or offices and getting a lay of the land and sort of thinking about this, we realized that the executive floor, which was kind of reserved for only those with executive upper management badges, they had this passive infrared sensors on the inside. So you didn't have to beep yourself when exiting, only when entering the floor. And for those who don't know, these passive infrared sensors have a very common vulnerability, because the way these things work is that they measure changes in temperature. They don't measure necessarily body heat when you approach them. So if you just go to your IT department and grab a regular can of air duster, that you use to clean keyboards and whatnot, and you hold it upside down, then the cold compressed propellant gases are going to exit instead of the regular air. So if you manage to spray that through or beneath the door, you're going to have it magically open, because it's going to trigger on the change in temperature, right? Demonstrated on the video here at this particular client. And this is while plenty of employees are watching, by the way. Nobody cares. I guess they thought I was cleaning the door or something. Because that got us into the offices and meeting rooms of upper management, where we could just place our various equipment. The final objective being taking pictures of the product prototypes. We just went outside the lab, found the closest employee, and say, "Hey, do you know who can open this door for us?" And they went, "Yeah, well, I can. Do you need me to?" "Yes, please." And they did. And, never mind the big sign on the door saying "No unauthorized personnel." They were like, "Yeah, we're just going to fix something in the ceiling," and mounted a fake ceiling camera, and got out of there. So by the end of all this, the chief of security, our actual client, went, "Hey, we need something more impactful than this to sort of raise awareness and see. So we want to see you get caught with something." So he went, "You know what, go back to the executive floor, break in with the air duster or whatever, and just clean it out on as many office chairs as you can, through the main entrance and not through the operations staff exit." So we got about 20 of them out before we started getting tired, and we called them up and like, "Is this fine?" And I was like, "Yeah, whatever." And at this point, the security guard that was watching us take all of these things out, he actually approached us and went, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I went, "Well, we're replacing all of these chairs, but it looks like our ride isn't coming with the replacements. Can you help us bring them back up?" And he was like, yeah, sure, of course. And we started dragging them together. And I still feel kind of bad about this, because he came to me afterwards and went, "Hey, can I get a replacement chair as well?" And I'm like, "You bet, man. I'll write that down for you." That was kind of the end of it.
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to be telling you about a little bit of a story from earlier this year. I have informally dubbed this Erik's winter adventure since it took place in January in cold, gray, snowy Netherlands, right? So this particular assignment was for a global logistics company headquartered in the Netherlands. The project itself was a covert red team with, the end goal being compromising business critical systems and functions, right? But the interesting part of this assignment was that it contained physical objectives as well. So in order to actually obtain those cyber-based objectives, the entry point for that was physical. So part of these physical objectives of the project was to actually just get into like restricted areas. I don't know why I did that. Maybe that's a spoiler. But the restricted areas also to then install a network implant so that we could access the network that way. More of like an optional objective was to see if we could break out of their kiosk systems that they had in the lobby and use those for something. And just quick reminder here, a kiosk system is like a semi-public computer that is like running a boxed off application that's intended to only allow the user to do one thing. But if you're a, computer guy, you're going to find a way to make that do something else, right? So with that, me and two colleagues flew to the Netherlands, stayed at a not great hotel close to the office. And as Erik mentioned earlier, the standard methodology applies. So we start with just reconnaissance, basically walking around the building looking as normal as possible as you can while you're walking around in January in the Netherlands around just a boring office building, right? But nobody found that suspicious, and we found all of this information that we need, such as, employee movement patterns, dress codes, where people come and go, how people come and go, etc. Right? So pretty quickly we realized, all right, cool, we could probably just walk right in. So that is being under the condition that somebody holds the door for us, right? Which, in case you don't know yourselves, look around you, everyone's going to hold the door open to everyone in this room because nobody here looks really that kind of weird or dangerous. That fortunately includes myself and my team, so we just waltzed right in. Hunched under someone's desk and throw back to the printer image that Erik showed earlier. Doesn't matter if you have network access control like 802.1x, it's possible to just bridge that connection and piggyback off of an authenticated laptop. So this is my beautiful Raspberry Pi-based implant. But we decided, hey, come on, we don't want to risk the client here thinking that there was just some super polite weirdo that just held the door open. So this little bad boy came out, the guy we just showed you. We nabbed some credentials, and all of a sudden we had our own access card, so we could come and go as we pleased, right? So we spent some time just hanging out in there. All the while I went down to the lobby and continued mucking around with these kiosk systems, and lo and behold, I don't know if anyone here has touched one of those, but click one place you're not supposed to, boom, you're friggin' out of there, Unfortunately, I don't have any useful picture of me installing Cobalt Strike on those kiosks. You'll just have to take my word for it. Instead, here's a picture of me enjoying a massage in their recreation room where I could also just walk right in.
Right, so what can we learn from this? We usually give recommendations that are highly specific for any given client, so it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all recommendation. But determining this initial risk profile or threat model is a decent first step to sort of figure out what you're up against, what you think you're up against, and from there you can start conducting a gap analysis against what you currently have in order to identify weak spots in your system. By implement a robust access control system, we're talking about batch readers and so on. That this is technology that doesn't move very fast, right? These are archaic protocols. Most of these systems have known vulnerabilities, and you need to either accept those risks or take them into account some other way. And finally, knowing and managing your assets, and these are everything from servers and access control to them, but also of course your employees. Where if you have a culture where people just don't care, or there's no way for them to be empowered enough to report suspicious activity without having to be confrontational themselves, you're going to lose out on a lot of visibility.
Right, so final slide of the talk. I know everyone's eager to go get smashed on beers, but just some key conclusions and takeaways that we want everyone to walk out of here with. The first one being that whether you like it or not, cyber and physical controls actually work in unison. So what I mean by that is you could be physically you could be Fort Knox, but if the admin panel of one of your most important systems is out on the internet, you're kind of dead, right? Conversely, if you have all of the cyber bells and whistles, but anyone named Erik can just walk in from the street and plug themselves in and evade all of your fancy BS, you're also kind of cucked. The second point being that perimeter defense is not everything, and this is fortunately something that most people have accepted as the truth in the cyber world, but the same is true for physical security controls as well. You need to take an approach where you have compensating controls. So instead of it being a case where once you walk past the reception, you're in, you could do anything, strive to maybe lock up your secret documents, maybe put a lock and scramble the combination on whatever thing you're trying to defend, right? Finally, probably the most important thing, and hopefully something that you all already know, but it's worth repeating regardless, it's always best to test your own security yourself before someone else tests it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys. So yeah, it helps being named Erik, maybe? I don't know. Any questions from the audience before we break up for the day? I have one all the way over there.
You told us a lot of stories about how you got away with it. Do you have any story of how you got caught?
Yes, actually, I have one. So I used the trick where I checked in to visit someone that no longer worked there. Turned out there were 2 people with that name. So I had continuously been notifying this person that does actually work there. They got really suspicious after a while. And so when I had gotten access to the building and I had done my stuff, actually the receptionist came back and he was like, what the fuck? Basically, the way that I handled that was by saying, there's been some mistake. He didn't buy it. And I did the very, very brave move of sliding a piece of paper across the table saying, I'm allowed to do this. Trust me, bro. And he did. Just escorted me out, didn't report anything. So, chef's kiss.
Another question here.
The RFID attack that you did, is that based on MyFair Classic or EM or?
So these particular cards or tags are EM 1100 or what it's called. But I mean, it also works against some of the crappier MyFair standards that have a small key space or commonly used keys that you can just sort of trivially brute force your way through in a short time window. It takes if you're lucky, it takes half a second. If you're unlucky, it takes maybe a minute. So, yeah.
That keypad attack, is that valid on other platforms as well?
What do you mean by platforms?
Yeah, the keypad, the readers,
Everything speaking the weekend protocol at least.
The what?
The weekend protocol is the physical binary protocol that the reader speaks to the control unit.
Yeah, to the backend controller. So what we've found is the majority of card readers still rely on the weekend technology or the weekend protocol. It's like a whole family of whatevers. But and that protocol is inherently vulnerable because it was designed 2 billion years ago. So. Anyone else?
Okay, then thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Big round of applause.